On Raglan Road on an autumn day I saw her first and knew that her dark hair would weave a snare that I would one day rue. I saw the danger, yet I walked along the enchanted way, and I said, let grief be a falling leaf at the dawning of the day.
And thank you so much. It's such a privilege being down here today and talking to you, John. I'm particularly interested in the title of the exhibition, Shifting Ground. That kind of brings me to what's over your head, the coronavirus symbol that we were all dreading when we were in lockdown.
You know, modern history as it happens today it's all very relevant to us. It touches us all. It's not like it was, you know, pre-war. Everybody wanted comfortable living as much as they could, and that was the objective. But nowadays you can't avoid what's happening in the world, and we're part of it, no matter where you live. And that's what I'm trying to show, and that's what I mean by shifting ground. The ground is shifting under our feet every day, practically.
You were very busy during the lockdown.
Oh yeah.
I know, apart from making sculpture, you were writing. You wrote about Joe Butler for the Irish Arts Review, and you were also supporting refugees to get into art school and things like that. Yeah. So you were doing other things remotely, which must have been quite difficult.
The artist should be active in society. You're not above and like God looking down, paring his fingernails and contemplating his navel and all that kind of thing. In the post-war situation in France, there was a lot of activity in cultural terms and societal and political terms, where you had people becoming engagés with their lives as they lived in a society, you know. And I feel that's still very relevant for an artist. It's difficult for me anyway to ignore. I can't ignore it, you know.
Literature has traditionally been a huge influence in your life. Every time we talk, you always mention Seamus Heaney and you always mention Patrick Kavanagh, so poets in particular. And you've made a really interesting body of work surrounding that today.
Tom Kenny said it to me one time, because he knew an awful lot being in the book trade. He said that poets are people who can see around corners when other people are absolutely dumbfounded by situations. Poets can see things that other people cannot see. And that's, for me, that's a very good reason to look to the poet for leadership and for vision and for humanity and expression. You don't have to go back to Homer or Dante, but we have in modern society, we have some people like Heaney and Kavanagh commenting upon Irish society, and it gives us a great solace and consolation with what they come up with and with hope, you know. Even as he was dying, Seamus Heaney was saying, "Be not afraid, ne temerare." That just shows you how committed he was to life.
You interpreted the work in different ways. You did this wonderful painting of him ambling out in a field, and everybody who studied Heaney for the Leaving Cert will be familiar with his poem Digging, and that's a huge theme in this exhibition as well.
Well, I knew Seamus from the very earliest days of my own career. I had an exhibition of lithographs in 1967 in the old Project Gallery in Abbey Street, and Seamus Heaney and John Montague came into that exhibition in the evening time, and they read their poems. Montague was very good, of course, but Heaney was exceptional, and he was only 25 or 6 years of age at the time. He was an exact contemporary of mine. There was only a few months between our births, you know. So I've always been close, and we became very friendly because I was a member of the Arts Council 1973 to 1979. We got to know each other very well, and it was a lifelong friendship after that. And Seamus disappeared to America and Oxford and all kinds of other places, and I was living in Galway. I didn't see much of him in those years, but we became very friendly then as things slowed down a bit for both of us. You know, right up to the end of his life, I was a very good friend of his, and Marley, of course, was a wonderful person. So, you know, I knew all the poets. I knew Kavanagh, I knew James Liddy, Cronin, and all of those people. MacDades was the foundation stone of modern Irish literature in the post-war period. And people such as Cyril Connolly and others used to go to MacDades. Louis MacNeice, you know, a really important literary figure. So that was always important to me.
You're known as a sculptor, but you're an absolutely fantastic painter as well. And I know from talking in the past that you taught life drawing in Trinity College during the strike in NCAD.
Yeah.
Your painting, can you tell me a little bit about the medium you use? It's a different side of the brain to sculpting, I'd say.
Oh, it is, yeah. It's a more cerebral side, I suppose, in many ways. But I always painted from the time I was a very small child. I mean, 2 or 3 years of age. And I loved it, and I never stopped, really. I then was trained as a metal worker, and that led me into an interest in making things, which I actually did. And I knew how to use metal from a very early age. I was barely a teenager, 15. I started an apprenticeship, which is a great thing for any artist, because all the old artists in the Middle Ages and in Greece, indeed, before that, and they were all trained very assiduously, and they had to live with a master. They were at his beck and call. You had to learn your trade very well. You had to be accepted before you became a journeyman. And in Germany, right up to this day, I do believe that the apprentices there have to go out on their journeyman year before they're fully qualified. All this leads up to great skills and contemplation, using everything you have. And painting represents all that to me, and I've always been interested. Sculptor then is the making, the maker. It's more of a making process. It's not perhaps as intellectually refined maybe as painting. You have to have a huge commitment to be a sculptor. There's very many people who would like to be different kinds of artists, but the work gets too hard and too dirty at times. They can't take that. They have to go back to something more refined or less arduous.
You have a long association with looking at migrants internationally and in an Irish context as well, and you connect that with the Irish famine.
Oh, that's the connection. When I started making serious work in the 1990s, I suddenly realised the connection between a number of different things, but particularly with modern migration and the parallel focus that I had connected with the famine. And that led me to other things. I mean, the Holocaust, it's in the same area, but it's not the same thing, historically speaking. But that also inspired me. So there was 3 different elements there. There was the Holocaust in the background. I grew up in the 1940s in Dublin. The war was on. We didn't feel much of it as they did in Britain, for example, or France or other European countries. But it was there in the background. There was rationing going on. I felt all this as a child. Then there was the famine, and I didn't know how to approach that as an artist until about 1990. And there was great concentration in Ireland then, and a lot of publications came out dealing with the famine and in all its aspects. Was very interested in that. And people like Tom Murphy, who wrote a fantastic play about the famine, that was an inspiration. Liam O'Flaherty had written a novel. But there was very few things before that in the cultural sense that I could identify with. But once those writers came to mind, and I began to realise what the famine really meant to Ireland and its people, I became engaged with that. And then suddenly the migration, due mainly to things like the Syrian war and Afghanistan and the African continent and North African, the Horn of Africa and all the countries around there, Somalia and so forth. That engaged me. I've been making pieces, both paintings and sculpture, but particularly sculpture, because I feel I'm mainly a physical person, a hands-on type of artist, and that's where it's led me to all of this activity.
And you have this knack of just focusing on something, like the man who's washing himself in the barrel. You know, you obviously observe things from life and then they suddenly transmogrify into these wonderful pieces. How does that work? 10
years ago, or maybe more, that I should go and become engaged with the migrants themselves. And I tried to get onto ships and that in the Mediterranean, but it was too risky and too dangerous. I went to Greece and I got in touch through the embassy with a migration camp, and that's where I mainly worked, Eliona, which is outside Athens, and I'm still engaged there. But due to pandemic, of course, it's closed everything down for the last couple of years. but I'm re-engaging now with that.
Apart from the theme of the bulb, which is synonymous with you and your ideas, also you find ships are a huge aspect of your oeuvre.
Yeah, well, due to the fact we are an island nation, we're stuck here on an island. If we want to move outside that and extend our experience of the world, we have to get on a ship. And unfortunately, the people who were victims of the famine had to do the very same thing. Joe Biden's, the people who were his extended family, the Blewitts, the head of that family in the 1840s was the head of the workhouse up in Ballina. So Joe Biden, as he said himself, he stepped on a ship one day, his ancestors did, and he came to America. And he's ended up as president. And think of an experience like that of one family, you know. We can trace that right back. Obviously, they were the fortunate people. But that was the experience of millions of people. And that went on all during the 19th century, right up to the time when Ellis Island was opened. The first person to step on to Ellis Island and be processed as a migrant into America was Moore, the little Irish girl. That's historic enough in its own sense, but it was also symbolic of what all of this involved Ireland in through the famine and post-famine. And our population went down to 3.5 million. We were disintegrating as a people. And I felt all that in a historical way. I felt I should express it. And this is the way I express it through art. And that's my intention with going out to the migrants. I bring them art. I'm just incidental as a kind of a figure in this whole process. They're more important than anything.
But you facilitate them.
I try to, but I mean, I only started when the pandemic came along. There's so much, both Ike and other artists who've expressed the same wishes to become involved. It'll take time, but I feel it's a very, very important thing. And the people I dealt with felt it was important too to them. It meant a lot to them when I could show them a few little processes. I have enough skills now to be able to pass them on, and I'd love to do that as well.
Yes, I always find that no matter how dark the situation, you're sort of a glass is half full person, and you'll always come out with a positive about it. What positive did you take from the pandemic?
Well, the positive was that, okay, we're locked down. I didn't go out the door for 2 months. It came all of a sudden on all of us. We weren't expecting it. I just said, I've got to be positive about this. I've got to work every day, which I did. And I'm going to deal with the situation as I see it. And this piece here behind me is just there to remind everybody that we're not free of this pandemic yet, the COVID-19 or anything like it. You know, it's still there. I'm representing the age that I live in as much as I can. And I think it was Toulouse-Lautrec said that we should be of our own day and age. We shouldn't be of another age, either past or in the future, but deal with what is there now in front of you.
So thank you very much, that's very inspiring.
On Raglan Road on an autumn day, I saw her first and knew that her dark hair would weave a snare that I would one day rue. I saw the danger, yet I walked along the enchanted way, and I said, let grief be a falling leaf at the dawning of the day. On Grafton Street in November, we tripped lightly along the ledge of a deep ravine where can be seen the worst of passions pledged. The Queen of Hearts still baking tarts, and I not making hay. Well, I love too much, and by such is happiness thrown away.